Human language is one of the most extraordinary abilities our species has ever developed, yet its beginnings are hidden so far back in time that we can only piece the story together through clues. Long before words existed, early humans relied on gestures, facial expressions, and instinctive sounds to communicate danger, comfort, or simple intentions. These primitive signals were useful, but they couldn't express anything abstract or complex. Something had to change before true language could emerge. That change came during what scientists call the cognitive revolution, a period roughly 70 to 100,000 years ago when the human brain underwent a dramatic shift. Our ancestors began to imagine things that weren't physically present, to plan ahead, and to share ideas that went beyond immediate survival. This new mental flexibility opened the door for symbolic communication, and once that door cracked open, language began to take shape. Researchers have proposed many theories about how the first words formed. Some believe language started with gestures and only later moved to vocal sounds. Others think early humans imitated the noises they heard in nature, slowly turning them into meaningful signals. Another idea is that language grew out of rhythmic chants used during group work, eventually becoming more structured. No one knows which theory is correct, but they all point to the same truth. Language didn't appear all at once. It evolved gradually as humans became more social, more cooperative, and more imaginative. Inside the brain, specialized regions like Broca's area and Wernicke's area began to take on the heavy lifting of producing and understanding speech. These areas are far more developed in humans than in any other species, suggesting that language became a core part of what it means to be human. By the time early humans were spreading across continents, the foundations of language were already firmly in place, ready to grow into the countless forms we know today. As humans spread across different regions of the world, language began to change in ways that reflected the environments and cultures of the people who spoke it. Small groups became isolated by mountains, oceans, deserts, and sheer distance, and over generations their shared language slowly drifted into new forms. What started as a single ancestral system of communication gradually branched into countless distinct languages, each shaped by the daily lives and needs of its speakers. A community living near the sea might develop dozens of words for tides, winds, and types of fish, while a group in a dense forest might create rich vocabulary for plants, animals, and navigation through thick vegetation. These differences weren't just practical. They also influenced how people thought about the world around them. As languages evolved, they developed unique rhythms, sounds, and structures. Some relied heavily on tone, where a single syllable could have multiple meanings depending on pitch. Others used long chains of prefixes and suffixes to build complex ideas into a single word. Some languages placed the verb at the end of a sentence, while others put it at the beginning. These variations weren't random. They reflected the cultural habits and cognitive patterns of the people who used them. Over time, language became more than a tool for communication. It became a marker of identity, a way for communities to distinguish themselves and preserve their traditions. Eventually, as societies grew larger and more complex, spoken language alone wasn't enough. People needed a way to record trade, laws, stories, and religious beliefs. This led to the invention of writing, one of the most transformative developments in human history. Early writing systems were simple at first, often just symbols carved into clay or stone to represent goods or numbers. But they quickly evolved into full scripts capable of capturing the richness of spoken language. Writing allowed ideas to travel across distances and survive across generations, turning language into a permanent record of human thought. Language doesn't just help us describe the world. It quietly shapes the way we understand it. Every time we speak, we're using a system of categories and concepts that our language has already carved out for us. This means that two people from different linguistic backgrounds might look at the same scene and notice completely different things, simply because their languages guide their attention in different ways. Some languages divide colors into broad groups, while others have many precise terms for shades that English speakers would lump together. As a result, speakers of those languages can distinguish subtle differences in color more quickly and effortlessly. In the same way, languages that rely on absolute directions like north and south train their speakers to stay oriented at all times, even in unfamiliar places. The influence of language goes deeper than vocabulary. It affects how we think about time, relationships, and even responsibility. In English, we often say things like, "I broke the glass," even if it was an accident. But in some languages, the phrasing shifts the focus away from the person and toward the event, something like, "the glass broke." Over a lifetime, these patterns can subtly shape how people assign blame or interpret intentions. None of this means that language traps us or limits what we can think. Instead, it nudges our minds in certain directions, making some ideas feel more natural and others less obvious. This connection between language and thought has fascinated scientists for decades. Some argue that language determines how we think, while others believe it only influences us gently. The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle. Our brains are flexible enough to understand new concepts, but the language we grow up with gives us a default lens through which we interpret the world. As we learn new languages or encounter new ideas, that lens widens, allowing us to see reality in ways we might never have imagined before. Language is always in motion. Even when it feels stable, it's quietly shifting beneath the surface, shaped by the way people speak, the mistakes they make, the new ideas they encounter, and the cultures they build. No language has ever stayed the same for long, because language lives inside people, and people are constantly changing. Words drift in meaning, pronunciations soften or sharpen, and grammar bends to the habits of everyday speech. Over generations, these small changes accumulate until the language spoken by descendants sounds completely different from the language spoken by their ancestors. You can see this process clearly by looking at the history of English. The language that existed 1,000 years ago is almost unrecognizable to modern speakers. Over time, English absorbed influences from Norse, French, Latin, and countless other sources, each wave of contact leaving behind new vocabulary and new ways of expressing ideas. But this isn't unique to English. Every language on Earth has been shaped by migration, trade, conquest, technology, and cultural exchange. When two groups interact, their languages rub against each other, borrowing words, blending structures, and sometimes merging entirely. Change also happens from the inside. Children don't learn language perfectly, they learn it creatively. They regularize irregular patterns, simplify complex rules, and invent new expressions. What begins as a child's innovation can spread through a community and eventually become the new normal. Technology accelerates this process even more. The rise of the internet, texting, and global communication has introduced new slang, new abbreviations, and new ways of writing that would have been unimaginable a few decades ago. These changes might seem sudden, but they're part of the same natural evolution that has been happening since the first humans began to speak. As we look toward the future, language continues to evolve in ways that reflect the rapid changes of our world. Technology has become one of the most powerful forces shaping how we communicate. The rise of the internet, social media, and instant messaging has created new forms of expression that move faster than any linguistic shift in the past. Abbreviations, emojis, memes, and hybrid styles of writing have become part of everyday communication, blending visual and verbal language in ways that previous generations could never have imagined. These new forms aren't replacing traditional language. They're expanding it, giving people more tools to express emotion, humor, and nuance in a digital environment. Artificial intelligence and global connectivity are also reshaping the linguistic landscape. People now interact across continents in real time, mixing languages, borrowing phrases, and creating shared vocabularies that transcend borders. This blending may eventually lead to new hybrid languages or simplified global dialects that help people communicate more easily across cultures. At the same time, many smaller languages are at risk of disappearing as younger generations shift toward more dominant global languages. Efforts to preserve and revitalize endangered languages are becoming increasingly important because each language carries unique ways of seeing the world that would be lost if it vanished. Looking ahead, language will likely become even more fluid, adaptive, and intertwined with technology. Voice assistants, translation tools, and AI-driven communication systems may change how we think about speaking and writing altogether. Yet despite all these changes, the core purpose of language will remain the same: to connect people, share ideas, and make sense of the world together. The story of language is ultimately the story of humanity itself, constantly evolving, endlessly creative, and always reaching for new ways to express what it means to be alive.